webinar, what we've been doing over the past year is just exploring some of the different research areas that are going on at PNNL and how they relate to the new grid storage launch pad that's being constructed right now and planned for opening towards the end of 2023. So today we're fortunate to have two speakers talking about high throughput capability and how that impacts our research here at PNNL. As you're probably aware, if you've been on the webinar before with the grid storage launchpad, really the focus there is how do we, accelerate the development of these new technologies, and then how do we validate that they are going to work for their intended application faster than we have done before. And so that's really the focus. And capabilities like being able to do this, the high throughput synthesis and evaluation of different materials are critical to that ability to accelerate that. So we're happy to have with us today Yangang Liang and Witness Martin from the PNNL battery group here, talking about those high throughput capabilities. I'll go through and do a quick introduction of them, and then we will let them give their presentation. Please, as you're going through and listening to the presentation, if you have questions, put those in the chat. At the end of it, we'll have roughly about 15 minutes where we'll answer your questions and have a discussion on some of the topics that were presented today. So with that, let me shift to doing some introductions here, and then we'll get the seminar started. So Dr. Yangang Liang is a material scientist in the Battery Materials and Systems Group. He joined PNNL in 2020, focusing on developing and applying high-throughput experimentation methodologies to accelerate design and discovery of novel storage materials. His doctoral work focused on the development of functional metal oxide thin films by high-throughput pulse laser deposition for advanced energy applications. He received his PhD in material science and engineering from the University of Maryland at College Park, and then both his and BS degrees in chemistry from Fudan University in Shanghai. Prior to joining PNNL, Dr. Liang worked in GE Global Research Center in Shanghai and New York, and BioLegend in San Diego for 9 years, focusing on designing and producing functional materials for applications in catalysis, industrial water treatment, polymer, OLEDs, SOFCs, and batteries. He has over 10 publications and 16 patent applications. Dr. Witness Martin has been with PNNL for 2 years. He joined the lab as a PhD intern in 2020 and stayed on to do his postdoc before being promoted to material scientist. His research mainly focuses on the development of silicon-based anode materials and electrolytes for use in lithium battery systems. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Pretoria, South Africa, a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Arkansas, and a PhD in Microelectronic and Photonics with a special focus on materials chemistry from the University of Arkansas. With that, I'd like to welcome our speakers, and we will let you take it away. And again, please put your questions that you have during the presentation into the chat, and we will get those in the end. So Witness, Yangang, you want to take over?
Yes. So let me share my screen first. Okay. Yeah, can you see my slides?
Yeah, we're seeing it in not in presentation mode. There's presentation, and it's coming through good.
Okay, so thanks. Thank you, Vince, for your introduction. Also, thanks for this opportunity to introduce our research work. In this talk, Dr. Martin and I will talk about how we use the high-throughput experimentation capability to accelerate our energy storage research. This talk includes 2 parts. I will present part 1. It's about the high-throughput experimentation capability and its application in redox-flow battery. Dr. Martin will present part 2. It's about the application of high-throughput methodology in lithium-ion battery. So for part one, high throughput solubility determination for data-driven materials design and discovery in redox flow battery research. So I will first introduce the background and our motivations. Then I will focus on the high throughput experimentation part, which include the development of the high throughput capabilities and one high throughput workflow to determine the solubility of redox active materials and its application in aqueous and non-aqueous redox flow battery. Also, we will show how we optimize the electrolyte formulations. So we all know that materials are very important. The advanced materials are the critical components of some emerging technologies. Traditionally, discovering new materials is through the experimental trial and error approach. For example, 100 years ago, Edison tested more than 1,600 materials to find a suitable filament materials. So nowadays, this method is not attractive. So because it's not only cost and time consuming, it also cannot meet our high requirement to the materials. We need multifunctional materials, which usually include much more elements in their compositions. So let's, from the periodic table, we can see there are so many elements and so many combinations. So if we talk about an organic compound, we usually include the configurations which will make the system more complicated. So it's impossible to test all the materials in a short time using the traditional method. Discovering a good material is kind of like winning the chemical lottery. We all know there is a trick to win the lottery. If we buy all of the tickets, we will win the lottery. So in this field, high throughput combinatorial methodology can help do this. So in 1970, Hennig already reported this methodology, and he used this method to speed up his research. However, there are very few papers related to this method in the following 25 years, especially in the field of material science. So until 1995, Professor Schwartz, he is a biochemist. He leveraged his experience in the biochemistry to the superconducting materials. He reported his superconducting study in Science. So this paper initiated the high throughput materials research. Then a lot of high throughput companies were founded. Also, some successful drug molecules were developed based on the high throughput methodology. Then both the academia and the industry started to investigate high throughput methodology and use this methodology to speed up their materials research. So actually, high throughput methodology has become one important component in some materials initiatives and some consortiums. Recently, with the development of the quantum calculation, lab automation, robots, and artificial intelligence techniques, we are transferring from the brute force experimental approach to the data-driven experimental approach. The future of the materials exploration will be based on the simulation and data powered by the machine learning and robots. Our current project is under the Energy Storage Materials Initiative, ESMI. So it's funded by our lab. It's a 5-year strategic investment to build the capabilities to accelerate the materials discovery and quick validation through a digital twin approach. The digital twin of battery will bridge the skills from the atomistic to the device for rapid materials discovery and device performance optimization. So in this program, our objective is to accelerate energy materials development from materials to systems to improve the performance and reduce the cost for next generation battery technologies. We first started to study the organic redox flow battery. Redox flow battery is a promising technology for grid energy storage. This cartoon shows its working principle. So actually, it's a very simple electrochemical device. It's operating in the aqueous solution, non-flammable solvent. So this device has high safety. So it also has the potential to reduce the cost. So because the energy is stored in the electrolyte in the tank, it's very easy for scale up. So this technology is also a promising candidate for the long duration energy storage. So in addition, our lab has studied redox flow battery for many years. We have achieved a significant cost reduction. We also developed a series of organic redox active materials to further reduce the cost and improve the performance. We have a lot of experts in this field. We also have enough experimental results in our lab. All this will help us to build up the digital twin of redox flow battery. One big technical challenge of current redox flow battery is the low energy density, which is related to the solubility. To address this challenge, we propose to study the solubility with the data-driven approach. The data-driven approach relies on large quantity and high quality database. However, there are no relevant database of materials properties. Also, there are no accurate prediction models. Even in the field of pharmaceutical industry, accurate prediction of the solubility is still a big challenge. So also currently the available prediction tools, they have some limitations such as the large errors. They cannot differentiate the isomers. It cannot correlate the solubility with the pH of the solution, with the composition of the solution. To address these challenges, we started to build up the solubility database through different approaches. Then we will correlate the structure property using machine learning. So as shown in this diagram, one important step in the whole process is the high-throughput experimental data collection. When we have large amount of data, we can help build, test, and validate the prediction models. So this is also our focus in the SME program. So we focus on the development of high-throughput experimentation capabilities and collect high-fidelity solubility data targeted the redox flow battery applications. So to build up the capabilities, we first customized 2 robotic systems in 2020, as shown in the picture. One system is operated in the nitrogen purge box for the general experiments. Another system is operated in the argon glove box for highly sensitive experiments. We know most of the battery materials are highly moisture and oxygen sensitive. We have to run the experiments inside the glove box. Both the systems are multifunctional. They have multifunctional hardware and intelligent software. It's a modular design. It's very easy for upgrade and very easy to integrate with the end user workstations. After we installed these 2 systems, we designed experiments to test and calibrate the key functions. Here we list the key functions. All these functions works very well. So is perfect for our wet chemistry process. So far, both systems are very busy and they are helping and supporting many projects in our lab by preparing large amount of samples automatically. So after we have the capability to prepare large amount of samples, the bottleneck becomes the high throughput characterization and measurement. Based on our current projects, we first studied the solubility, viscosity, and electrochemical measurements. We started with some commercial instruments. With some customizations, we have developed the high throughput UV scanning method to determine the concentration of the redox active materials and study their stabilities in the electrolyte solutions. We also developed the high throughput viscosity measurement. We designed electrochemical cells to perform the high throughput impedance and CV scanning. We also customized this kind of robot to integrate the high throughput measurement with our robotic platform, and then we can increase the automation of our whole process. So because most of the projects have different requirements for their workflow, we need to spend some time to develop specific workflow and a specific high throughput characterization method for different projects. So everything is ongoing. So actually we need some experts from different areas to help us. So when we have this capability, our first task is to measure the solubility. So solubility measurement seems very simple and easy, just as what we learned in the high school. So however, it's very difficult to determine the thermodynamic solubility. So it's more complex than most of us might think, because there are many factors affect the thermodynamic solubility values, such as the property of the solute, the composition of the solvent, temperature, pH, also the analysis method. So even for now, there is no standard method to measure the thermodynamic solubility. So only one gold standard is the classical shake flask method. So in order to get the accurate thermodynamic solubility, the equilibration time should be long enough. However, its throughput will be low. To balance the quantity and the quality, we propose to combine the robotic platform with the 4-step workflow. With our robotic platform, we can run multiple experiments in parallel to increase the throughput. With the 4-step workflow, we can make sure the quality. This workflow is also easy to run more than 200 samples per round of experiments. In addition, the whole process is highly automated, which means we can free up the scientist's time for some meaningful job. So after we finalize the workflow, we optimize the key parameters using these two compounds. These two compounds have very similar structure with the typical redox active molecules. They have exactly the same water-soluble functional groups. They have high water solubility. They are chemically stable and commercially available. So based on these two compounds, we systematically optimize the key parameters in our 4-step workflow. So in this workflow, the mixing time and the phase separation method determine the accuracy of the thermodynamic solubility determination. So we systematically study their effect on the solubility values as shown in these two figures. So actually, most of our candidates have very high water solubility. It's very easy and fast to reach the equilibrium. But here we still suggest to use a long enough time to mix the solution so that we can make sure the lab-to-lab comparison in the future. For the quantification analysis, both the NMR method and the UV-Vis method works very well. But here we selected the NMR method because we don't need to prepare the calibration samples in the NMR method. So here the NMR method is still a high throughput fashion. We can run multiple samples automatically. So finally, we standardize the process as shown here. We try to quantify each parameters. Using the standardized process, we can get reliable and repeatable data easily. With the standardized process, we first studied the aqueous solubility of the fluorine derivatives. This material is a new core structure for aqueous redox-flow battery. It was reported by our group last year. So there are very few reports about their solubility. Also, the detailed experimental conditions are not available. So we did a systematic study about their solubility in different composition of the solvent. We also studied their solubility of different isomers as shown here. So all these results are very useful and interesting. So this result highlights the difficulty in predicting the aqueous solubility of this kind of materials. So because the solvent composition, isomers, and the morphology of the solid, all of them will affect the solubility values. So these results also emphasize the importance to select the data under the application-related conditions. So otherwise, we cannot get the accurate prediction models. So also the result on the isomers, which can help us have a deep understanding about the position of the functional groups on the solubility so that we can further improve our prediction models. So another thing we learned from this that if we publish our solubility results, we need to include all the details. Otherwise, we will give some misleading information for other researchers. We also use our workflow to screen the effect of additives on the solubility of fluorine derivatives. We selected the CD and sorbitol as the additive materials because both materials are electrochemical stable with a very low cost. Here is the three candidates we use in our study. So these two materials were synthesized in our lab. We have demonstrated that they have relatively high performance even without the additives. Here is our screening result. This solubility result is very interesting and useful. From the result, we can see both the number and the position of the carboxylate and the sulfonate groups have significant effects on the solubility and the solution stability. So here, the solution stability means that there is no precipitation, no solidification. We hope the solution is highly flowable so that also with very low viscosity so that we can pump the electrolyte easily. So as shown in this picture, for this material, we can see most of the samples become solid. This is what we want to avoid. So among these results, we can see this candidate 4C7SFL shows the best performance for both the solubility increase and the solution stability. So based on this optimal electrolyte formulation, we tested its battery performance. Here is the detailed testing condition. So as shown here, we have demonstrated the high battery performance. The electrolyte utilization is over 86%. There is almost no change in the capacity over 18 days, more than 100 cycles. So actually we can continue the cycling. So unfortunately, the cell is leaking. We lost all the materials. But currently we are synthesizing more materials to continue this study based on these optimal electrolyte formulations. So one important thing is that we already increased the energy density by 24%. So actually we can do further improvement because in this study we use 1.7 m. So theoretically we can increase the concentration to 1.9. So we can do further energy density improvement in the future. We also studied this workflow to measure the solubility of redox active materials in organic solvent for the non-aqueous redox flow battery applications. Non-aqueous redox flow battery are operated in the organic solvent. Organic solvent had a wide operation voltage. It can increase the energy density further. That's why some scientists are very interested in the non-aqueous redox flow battery. So however, the most of the published results are only based on a few organic solvent. The most popular solvent is acetonitrile. So here we systematically selected more organic solvent and studied the solubility of benzyl thiazole BTZ in different organic solvent systems. We first optimize the 4-step workflow. There is no any big change, only the step 2. We use the centrifugation only procedure. For the analysis step, we use a different internal standard for the NMR analysis. Based on this 4-step workflow, we did the labor force participation time comparison between the manual process and the high throughput process. So as shown in the table, when we run more samples, we could save much more time. So the high throughput process will be more efficient. That's why we try to design more experiments in one round of our experiment. So here is the list of the solvent candidates. We selected these solvents based on their chemical and physical properties. Then we systematically studied the solubility of BTZ in the single solvent and the binary solvent systems. So this picture shows the real samples of the saturated solutions. We can see the clear phase separation, which means we already have the saturated solution. I mean, the last one is a control sample. It shouldn't be have the solid. So we also test the feasibility for this workflow to run more than 200 samples. So it works very well. In addition, we also expanded this workflow to determine the concentration of lithium salt in different organic systems for lithium metal and lithium-ion battery applications. Yeah, here is the summary for part 1. We have developed the high throughput experimentation capabilities to collect to prepare large-scale samples and to perform the property measurement. We also developed a highly automated workflow to determine the solubility of redox active materials. We also demonstrated its utility in the aqueous and the non-aqueous redox flow battery. We also optimized the electrolyte formulation for a high performance battery. So another important information is that we are open to any collaborations. So if you are interested in our high throughput system, please feel free to contact us. We also thank the funding support from our lab and from the GCEDA program. also thank our collaborators and team members from PNNL and ANL, Argonne National Laboratory. So before we jump to part 2, I wanted to show a short video for our sample preparation process. So as you can see, we use the robotic arm to move the plate into the balance chamber, and then we can dispense the solid into the vial automatically. So the accuracy is about 0.1 milligram. So it's much more accurate than human operation. And then we dispense the solvent into the vial to make the saturated solution. So everything is automatic. And then we do the automatic press filtration to get the clear saturated solution. And after this, we can do the capping and uncapping operation to transfer 30 or 50 microliters of saturated solution into the sample vial for the NMR or UV analysis. Yeah. Okay, let's go to part 2.
Thanks, Yangang.
Okay.
I'm going to take control now. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yes, you're coming through great. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, so thanks, Yangang. My part will be about taking what you just saw in that video and kind of demonstrating a practical application of that robotic system in the development of non-flammable electrolytes for use in lithium-ion batteries. If I can just get this mouse to work. Okay, so as I said, I'll be showing you how I use the system to develop non-flammable electrolytes using a high-throughput methodology and using the system that you just saw in the video. As a brief background, I'll be giving you a quick background on what safe electrolytes are and what they mean in lithium-ion batteries. I'll then show you how I went and used the high-throughput system to prepare electrolytes. After that, I will walk you through the screening process to single out those candidate electrolytes that are actually good, that we predict to be good, versus all the other junk that we kind of don't want to take further on into the test, because that is a large workload that you don't want to bother with downstream. And then I'll give you a performance comparison of the developed electrolytes that I've made, and give you a summary. Now, a disclaimer: most of this work is unpublished. Actually, the work is unpublished, so there will be gaps on specifics. And if I do apologize firsthand if there's anyone in the audience that'd like to have more specific details on a lot of the things that I'll be talking about. Lithium-ion batteries really have a serious safety concern that needs to be addressed. The one is when cells or batteries are mishandled, i.e. misused, they undergo mechanical abuse, or they're overcharged, they enter a state of failure, and this is characterized by a thermal runaway. So a self-propelled temperature-propelled breakdown of the battery, where that leads to catastrophic failure. And this in itself manifests itself in the form of materials breaking down and the highly flammable carbonate electrolyte decomposing. And when it decomposes, it gives off explosive and flammable gases. Typically, you'd find hydrogen in there, which is highly explosive, and you find oxygen in those evolved gases, which we all know if you have oxygen and you have a fire, it just makes the fire more intense. So now, the electrolyte is a major contributor to this gas evolution, right? So to combat this, there's typically two approaches that people take or research has taken. One, we add non-flammable additives to the current state-of-the-art liquid electrolytes that we have, which we already know are flammable. So we just add non-flammable additives to diminish the flammability of the electrolyte. Another approach is to outright just use non-flammable solvents altogether in formulating the electrolyte, and this makes the electrolyte or renders it essentially flame resistant. Now, what people, like Yangang mentioned, there's thousands upon thousands, billions of different compounds out there that you could use. So finding the right one and using it is a huge challenge. Research right now is focusing on these two different areas within kind of like the jungle of compounds out there, fluorine-based compounds as well as phosphate-based compounds. And those typically are used because when the electrolyte decomposes, with phosphate specifically, it decomposes, and the radicals that are formed from the phosphate actually act as scavengers and quenchers. So they go and bind themselves to the evolved hydrogen or the evolved oxygen, and then in that sense, remove some of those flammable compounds that are formed when the battery goes into thermal runaway and catastrophic failure. And so those are kind of like the solvents that people use to solve this flammability concern within electrolytes. Now, making electrolytes. So if you know the solvents and the components and the salts and stuff that you want to use, you have to go and make the electrolyte, right? So the traditional approach is one, finding or selecting your salt, solvents, and additives. You then go and formulate the electrolyte. You then put this electrolyte through a self-performance test. And then once you know how it performs, you can then go and optimize the electrolyte. So making additional changes to it to actually get it to the point, the level of performance that you want. Now, this traditional approach is all by hand, and it has a lot of bottlenecks. One, you're really limited on the number of selections that you can make because you're making this all by hand. You can't go and test 1,000 different chemicals because it takes so much time. So you have to limit your experimental size to like a really small piece. Not only that, the formulation of the electrolytes is really slow because you have to make each formulation by hand. And then once you have the formulation, you then have to go and do lengthy tests to actually satisfy yourself with how the electrolyte performs. And all of this is all by hand. It's tedious, it's long. I've done it, I hate it. Actually, maybe I shouldn't be saying that. But we have a high throughput system, and the high throughput approach gives us an additional capability or an ability to take this tedious work and make it a little bit more palatable for the person who's doing the work. And the improvements are such that you can make more selections because you're using a robotic system to mix all these things. So you can select more chemicals. You can also then have higher speed at which you formulate these electrolytes and a better consistency, because a robot is just far better at doing manual tasks than a human being can. And once you have that, that is all equipment enabled. So the system enables you to do these two first parts, but there's still an additional bottleneck in once you have the formulation, you still need to put it through actual physical testing and seeing how the electrolyte performs. And here we have a novel approach where we actually screen. So if you're making 1,000 electrolytes, we screen out a bulk majority of them before we actually even send them through testing. And this here is just a nice and quick and easy, cheap step where we take all the electrolytes that we performed here, we put them through a screening step before we then promote them to the next step, where we actually make cells and test them for performance. And then once we have the performance, we can then go and do the typical optimization, electrolyte optimization process. In this experiment, what I've done is I've essentially used 4 different tools. One, there's a software component which is linked to the robot. So you design all your electrolyte formulations and combinations in software. You then put this through a robotic system where you formulate really small quantities of electrolyte, because you also want to save on cost, not only time. So you make really, really small quantities of electrolyte. And then we have this in-house electrolyte screener, which is akin to kind of like a litmus test. Litmus test tests for pH. We are testing essentially for a predictor on how this electrolyte will perform before we then take it into a coin cell and do the testing further. To achieve real high throughput, you really need to reduce the time on each experiment as well as the cost on each experiment. To achieve these 2 things, one, we really only formulate really small volumes, and our screening tool it costs less than 1,000th of a cent for each of these electrolytes. So it's really, really, really cost effective, and it just makes the job that much easier. And then only once we have the selected formulations can we then promote them to the land tester. And so here, what I'm going to show you is, this is all essentially the same thing. It's 4 trays. You can see here you have 4 trays, and you have 3 different colors, so 3 different electrolytes, so 3 different salts. And what you're seeing here is essentially just the same thing as the previous, where you have 4 different trays. You have 3 different salts, gray, red, and blue. And then we have 8 different solvents for each salt, as well as 8 different additives for each salt. And with that, what you then find is that you have 182 candidate electrolytes that you are formulating. But then there's an additional issue with electrolyte testing, is that no 2 graphites are really the same. So if you have graphite 1 from one supplier and graphite 2 from one supplier, typically you also find that there's inconsistencies or difference in how those electrolytes, pairings with electrolytes, actually come together. And we then decided, okay, cool, if we have these electrolytes, we also need to try and find and match it to an appropriate graphite material that actually enables the cell to work. And that is what you see here with these little numbers here. So we're testing 6 different screeners, and each of them are essentially kind of like a test against this graphite material. And what you then see is that you have 1,100 variations, 1,152 variations. And that's quite a lot of variations. And not only that, when you make coin cells and you test them, you actually have to make 2 coin cells per electrolyte, because if you only make 1, you don't really know whether, you don't have a benchmark or reference as to whether that's a good performance or bad performance, or whether it's a good cell or a bad cell. So you have to make 2, so that if they both look the same, then you know that there wasn't any error in the cell that you made. So what you then find is that you have 2,300 coin cells that you have to prepare. Now, I mean, I'm no slouch, but 2,300 coin cells is a lot of work. And like I said, it's tedious and I don't like it. So how do we then reduce this number to make it easier for the researcher? What we find is that using the screener, essentially you reduce it from 1,152 variations. You find that only really 37 of them are viable and promising candidates because of how the screener works. And this makes it much easier, because now instead of formulating or making 2,300 coin cells, you only have to make 74, and which is, I mean, 97% reduction in any downstream work is, I mean, it's a huge reduction. And this kind of reminds me of a saying from my high school teacher, so many are called, but few are chosen. So only really the select few and exceptional candidates are chosen for the following follow-on tests. Now, to show how, to prove, how do we actually know that the screener really does select and give you candidates that are viable? To do that, I'm going to show you kind of like an example of 3 different variations here. All of them with the same salt, so or gray, and then all have the same solvent, and then we're testing against different additives, additive 5 and additive 8. And with additive 8, you see that the green ones are the viable ones, by the way, so I forgot to mention that. So with additive 8, we find that these two variations are promising as predicted by our screener, but then we find that even within them, you still find some difference in performance. And I'll show it here. So if you look, so I'm going to go back. This is brown, so kind of like a junk electrolyte because it's gray. It didn't show any reactivity to our test. And then we have two promising candidates, blue and yellow. And what you find here is that the bad electrolyte, so the brown one, really, it gives us really poor performance because one, we're testing it against graphite, which has a specific capacity of about 320 milliamp hours per gram. And what we find is that charging and discharging over multiple cycles, you only can extract or use 5 milliamp hours per gram out of that graphitic material, which is poor, right? It's almost essentially junk. So it's a dead cell. It doesn't really do anything. And not only that, you can see that the performance is less than 100%. So already right off the bat, it's a poor performing cell. Kind of don't want to use that. And then we find the blue one, which is promising, also kind of doesn't really give us what we want, even though it has an order of magnitude greater than this one, which is, this one is 50, this one is at 5. So it's 10 times better performing in terms of capacity. It's still a far cry from the 320 milliamp hours per gram that we want. And not only that, the efficiency is up there, but it's still not 100%, also poor. So we would stay away from this electrolyte. And then looking at the last one, you see that one right off the bat, you're reaching that 320 milliamp hours per gram. So you're able to fully charge and discharge that cell to its full capacity. Not only that, the efficiency is almost 100, it's essentially 100%, just a little shy of 100%. So this already tells you that this electrolyte and graphite pairing is a worthy candidate to then promote for further optimization. So you then go and optimize it for maybe changing the viscosity, adding other additives to it, and just changing the formulation so that one, you can enable cycling at higher rates, at longer durations, at different temperatures, just so that once you get those performance parameters, you can then put it into a full cell test where you test it against a known cathode, so maybe like an NMC or LCO or an LFP, so you can see how the electrolyte performs in full cell conditions. Here we're testing at really low C rates because we want to see how the thermodynamic kind of discharge of the cell works, because if it can't even work at small little discharge rates, then you typically wouldn't expect a good performance at high rates. So this is essentially that first screening step that we take before we do a large scale testing. And this is just one sample, one data point that I'm presenting. Because the data is not really published, I can't really go into too much about all the further testing that we've done, but I can maybe share that there is a patent in the works that we've filed for that was born out of the work that we've done here. As a summary, one, I've demonstrated the capabilities of using a low cost and bulk electrolyte testing procedure, electrolyte formulation procedure. I've then also shown how we can develop, and we've developed an ability to systematically screen and test electrolyte formulations, and then developed a way to actually test the suitability of these different electrolytes against various graphite anode materials. And with that, it kind of really concludes my talk. I will say that if there's anyone out there or anyone on the call right now who is in the business of developing electrolytes and would like to leverage some of this work that we've done and maybe collaborate with us, please do reach out. We're open to working with anyone in the industry who wants to further the safety in electrolytes and make lithium batteries a known and common use device for everyone and out there. And I'd like to acknowledge PNNL for supporting this work, as well as funding from the SME project. And with that, I'm going to hand over the talk to Vince or Yangang. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Witness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have a few questions come in. Witness, I'll follow up with one of yours that came through that on one of your last slides there when you were doing the testing. Mm-hmm. When you said the near 100% efficiency on the first cycle. What does that mean in terms of SEI formation? Is there no SEI that's being formed, or?
So there will be SEI formation, but so here what we essentially just saying is that you have all the ions that you're sending into the graphite, what you're getting out. With the SEI formation, that is more about the electrolyte and how that breaks down and forms a film on the electrode. And typically it doesn't, I'm not going to say it doesn't affect efficiency, but yeah, it's the electrolyte itself is giving us near 100% efficiency. I don't know if that really answers the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did want to take a step back. One of the things, so you kind of showed two different approaches towards going after this. So really a lot of it worked with the electrolyte formulation that we're looking at and a property. So what can, looking at solubility or, something else, but I think in an earlier slide, you mentioned the possibility of doing CV curves combined with high throughput. Or what else can you do with this system that expands it? So I know, Witness, in yours, you were taking the samples out and doing coin cell. Are there potential to try to move that into actually the high throughput system and expanding kind of the property measurements that we're kind of looking at now?
Yeah, so here we're only really doing one screening for performance, but here you can actually then add additional screeners, so testing for solubility, testing for viscosity, and then using that as also predictors for performance, because viscosity does play a huge role in how, say, diffusion works within a cell. So adding additional screening steps here only really betters the prediction of the candidates further down the line.
Yangang, did you have any follow-up or anything you wanted to add to that, or?
Yeah, I have a little bit more information for this. I mean, for the further high throughput capability development, so currently there are some commercial high throughput coin cell maker. It can fabricate the coin cell automatically. I remember it can fabricate 64 or 100 coin cells per day automatically in a glove box. So if we can develop this kind of capability in PNNL, so that will further improve our efficiency for the whole process.
Okay. And then there was another question. Well, basically, I think you did a great job showing how this is really a multiplier in terms of how fast we can look at samples and get that information and go down. But as we talked about earlier in here, there's the role of AI machine learning, whether that's upfront and down selecting that, down the materials that we're going to put through the high throughput. Can you expand a little bit in terms of where you see the role of AI machine learning, in this, and does that give us, even a greater multiplying effect in terms of developing these new material systems?
Okay, I can take a stab at that, and maybe Yangang can add as well. So my work here is really the preliminary work before you actually we don't have data sets to use in machine learning models. So what I'm doing here is finding solvents and matching that and seeing how they perform. And then once we have good electrolyte candidates, we can then go and do all these other additional data point sampling and then create this database to then apply this to machine learning. So there is definitely a need to actually apply machine learning. I just, in my work, haven't done so because I don't have the data sets to apply that work.
So really, in your case, you're developing the training models that will go into that. So you're using the high throughput to actually reinforce the AI and machine learning tools that we've made.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and here a little bit more information for this question. You know, the trend is that we integrate the machine learning, robot, and the experimental design together, and then we can do less experiment to identify the good candidates. So, but this need a database first, so that we can train the model to predict the functionalities. And the ideal case is that we use the inverse design. So after the design, we can only do one experiment to make the target material. But that's ideal case. So currently, there are some demonstrations from the literatures, but there is no real applications, you know, for the inverse design for autonomous experiment. A lot of people just demonstrate this concept using very simple system. So that's our focus, you know, for next step. We can close the loop, and then when we tell the program what we need, and after some time we will get the material what we designed.
Mm-hmm. That sounds great. Well, I know we're running out of time. We did have a few questions in there about how do they engage with us on, you know, opportunities to use this capability. And I think, you know, we've provided an email. We will reach out directly, or I think we'll provide those emails to you through the chat function in terms of engaging with us. But I will say at all times, you can go to the PNNL.gov website and search for our names. And most of the times it will be right there with our contact information to pull out. But yeah, we are happy to connect. And I think as both our speakers mentioned, look for those opportunities when we can do that. So thank you very much for your time today. I did want to kind of highlight our upcoming events that are coming through. We have one more session scheduled in our energy storage at PNNL webinar. So December 1st, Jeremy Twitchell will be presenting. If we can bring that up. There it goes, on energy storage as a transmission and dual use asset. That will be December 1st on that. And then just for those of you that have been to several of these, we are looking after that. We'll take a brief break over the Christmas holidays, resume mid-January, and we'll move towards doing more panel discussions with our research partners. And so our first one is targeted to be safety and bringing in, you know, other partners that we work with in the supply chain and in the end use on, you know, what are the pressing issues that need to be addressed from safety, and we will take a topic and bring in a panel and expand on that. So that'll be the new format moving forward for everyone. So we hope you can join us for those. Yangang Witness, thank you again for your time today and interesting talk on those capabilities. So thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.